joining us today. We really would like to welcome Jeffrey Lime, who is Jeremy, sorry, Jeremy Lime, who is an immigration lawyer with extensive experience. And we have local office right in Aurora. Serving the Aurora community for over 15 years. And so we do just want to give a small plug to let you know that we also have a lot of information available here at the library. Or if you want more information about legal services available in the community, resources, know your rights cards, notary services, we offer all those free of charge at the library. And so, Jeremy, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks to Aurora Public Library for having me. Having a little bit of technical issues here, but got it all sorted out. So, as Monica mentioned, my name is Jeremy Lime. I've been doing only immigration law for 16 years, and we've been here in Aurora since 2012. And so we're going to talk about why don't you just get legal? So we're going to kind of start from that proposition, which is an innocent enough question because, really, why is it that we've got 12 million undocumented people in this country anyway? Obviously, it's not a great system. Or there's a lot of people who are making really bad decisions for us to have sort of this issue. So we're going to go from that premise, but just really quickly, I have to show you this paragraph that says that I'm not your lawyer just because you're looking at this presentation. So there, I've shown you that. And the agenda is going to be, as I mentioned, why do we have so many people that are undocumented here in the first place? And then I'm going to touch on basically our system. Excuse me. Hey, Kathy, I'm sorry, I'm having a clicker issue now. There we go. Sorry, thanks for that. So we're going to talk about the removal process, the rights of undocumented people, some practical advice about what to do in the event of ICE contact. I do want to mention that we have a Spanish language version of this presentation beginning in about an hour. That's going to be a little bit more weighted in terms of practical advice about what to do in the event of ICE contact, but we're going to touch on that as well. So then we'll just go over a few miscellaneous issues, like basically current events. So part one, why are there so many undocumented people in the first place? So the slide here is, if my grandma came legally, why can't they? So what I'd like to do is work through several hypothetical examples to sort of illustrate some of the blind spots that we have in our legal immigration system. So this first hypothetical, her name is Annie. Annie was born in County Donegal, Ireland in the year 1892. She had no relatives who were citizens or permanent residents in the United States. She did not have a visa. She just got on a ship and came to the United States. She came to the United States in 1923, was admitted as a permanent resident at Ellis Island. The reason I wanted to use Annie as a hypothetical, two reasons. First, it's my... So the reason I'm using Annie as a hypothetical, first, it's my great grandma. And secondly, it's the way that many of us, specifically like European Americans who've immigrated at some point in the last 100 to 200 years, we think that we still have the same system that brought our great grandparents here, and we very much don't. And so that's what I want to sort of reveal a little bit today. So just really briefly, what's happened during the last 102 years? So the first thing is that we had this piece of legislation called the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, or the INA. And the INA established a quota of 290,000 immigrant visas per year. And it also established what we call priority status for skilled workers and for the family of US citizens. And then the piece of legislation that's most impacted sort of on this community that I work with right now was passed in 1996, and that's something called IRA. And what IRA did was it expanded the list of what we call grounds of deportation or removability. And it also expanded the list of reasons why somebody would be inadmissible, meaning ineligible to come to the United States. So it's no longer enough to just get on a ship and cross the sea. Now you actually have to have some sort of a hook in terms of like a family relationship or professional skills, for example, that would allow you to come in. Some of the examples of things that now will get you, that will make you inadmissible since 1996 are what we call false claims to US citizenship, regardless of the reason. There's something that's known as the permanent bar that applies to anybody who's ever been unlawfully present in the country for a year and then leaves and then comes back into the country without inspection. And then we also have something known as the 10-year bar, which is somebody who's been unlawfully present in the country for a year or more. So again, that's all since 1996. So continuing on with some hypotheticals, we have the case of Brenda and Maria. Maria Carmen, do you mind if I call on you to be sort of a volunteer? Okay. So Brenda and Maria. Brenda came to the United States from the Philippines with her parents in the year 2015, when she was 2 years old. Her sister Maria was born here 2 years later. So Maria Carmen, can you tell me what status do you think Maria has in the United States?
She came 2 years later.
She was born here.
Oh, a US citizen.
Yeah, US citizen. Which again is sort of like a topic of current events, whether you're still a US citizen just by being born in the country. But for now, Maria is in fact a United States citizen. So the question is, how long is the line for Brenda? Oh, so we're good. Awesome. Okay. So the question is, how long is the line for Brenda? Patrick, Marty Carmen, do you guys want to hazard a guess? So
It shouldn't be very long.
shouldn't be.
20 years.
You think it's gonna be 20 years? Do you think it would ever take 20 years to get your papers in this country?
Not if you're already a citizen.
And if you're not a criminal, right? Oh, no, not a citizen. We're talking about,
Oh, okay.
yeah. We're talking about a kid who comes here when she's 2, overstays through visa. And now she has a sibling who was born here because, younger sibling was born after they got here, right? So the hypothetical, never committed a criminal infraction, pays her taxes, helps little old ladies cross the street, the whole ball of wax. How long is it going to take the United States to give her status or citizenship?
5 years.
Let's say 5 years. Monty Carmen says 20 years. Let's do the math. So the way that it works is a United States citizen can file a petition for their sibling when they turn 21. So we wait until the year 2038. At that point, Brenda starts waiting for something called the priority date to become current. The priority date is when the State Department says, okay, now there's a visa that's available. Why is that necessary? Well, it's because there's these limits ever since 1965. Right now, that priority date, that gap between the cases that the State Department is processing and the people who applied is about 22 years. It's likely to be much longer than that. So then what happens after those 22 years? 22 years, but we're not done yet. It's 22 years, but what that means is that Brenda can go to Manila and apply for an immigrant visa. What happens when she leaves the United States is she triggers this 10-year bar that has only been around in the laws for less than 30 years. So the 10-year bar gets triggered, which means that she has to remain outside the country for 10 years. So if she does everything right, Brenda will be eligible to immigrate to the United States in the year 2070. Right? So that's about a 25-year wait time from now. And believe me, I did not have to stretch my brain to come up with this hypothetical. This is a very real sort of circumstance. So that's the case of Brenda Maria. I'd also like to look at the case of Gabriela and Patricia. So Gabriela and Patricia, they're Mexican. They came from the United States in 1991. They tried to get tourist visas, but they were denied. And so what do? Well, they crossed the border illegally. So it's the technical term is they crossed the border without inspection. I very much do not want to become the word police, but we do have to talk about the I word, right? And so Gabriel and Patricia entered without inspection. It's technically correct to say that they entered the country illegally, that what they did could be classified as illegal immigration because they crossed the border in violation of the law. However, like I'm a United States citizen, it's also illegal for me to cross the border at a time or place other than where they tell me that I'm allowed to cross. So it's a criminal violation if a citizen does it the same way an undocumented person would do it. Where I think it gets really slippery is once you just start to refer to people as illegal immigrants or aliens. Because at that point, it's what I would think of as dehumanizing language. So anyway, they crossed the border without inspection. And so now they've been here, 34 years. They've got 4 children, all of whom are born in the United States. Their oldest is Emma. She's now 22 years old. Their son, Brian, has ALS, and he requires around-the-clock care. So the question is, and again, sorry to put you guys on the spot, how long is the line for Gabriel and Patricia? Do you guys think that based on these circumstances, they're eligible to become permanent residents or citizens in the United States?
Well, if they were born, the kids that were born in the United States.
Yeah.
Well, why don't they just go down and get there and get a driver's license or whatever they need,
Go
get
down.
a citizenship proof.
Great question. So what would happen in a case like that? There's no office where they can apply for citizenship inside the United States. So there's a law that says that if you came into the country without inspection, you have to leave and apply for a visa back home, right? So this time you have to do it the right way. The issue is this thing called the 10-year bar. Because at this point, they've been here for more than 1 year without presence, without status. So we choose this system to say, hey, now you have to go back to Mexico and this time come back the right way. And something you might have heard about is the government is now saying, we'll give you $1,000 and a free plane ticket to just leave. And then you can come back the right way. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just, it's going to happen. Well, we have to worry about it. What's going to happen in their case is they trigger the 10-year bar. And so they can either just remain in the United States and be undocumented, or they can depart and spend those 10 years outside the country. Some people, right? I wish that we could show your face right now on the Zoom, Patrick. It's a great face. That's what I was looking for. Where's the efficiency in this? Doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Or equity or anything else.
No equity, no justice. Exactly. It's not in the kid's best interest, right? So as you can imagine, some people make the decision to leave and spend those 10 years outside.
So it's all these people that are complaining about being illegal
Mhm.
here, they can't just go, they can't go in and say, well, I really am a citizen because I was born here.
Oh, no, we're talking about people who were not born here. We are talking about people who crossed the border illegally, right? But at this point, they've been here for 30-something years and the parents of 4 US citizen children. So we're talking about the Mexican parents of the kids that were born here, right? So what can the parents do? So I'm just going to go through the factor in here. Because she's now over the age of 21, their oldest daughter, Emma, can file a family petition for her parents. And they're eligible to go to Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, and apply for immigrant visas.
And then,
The problem is that because they've accumulated over 1 year of unlawful presence, they're going to trigger the 10-year bar. Now, there's what's called a waiver of that 10-year bar. If you can show that a qualifying relative would suffer an extreme hardship. You can get a waiver if you have a US citizen or permanent resident spouse or parent, but not kids. There's no waiver to avoid hardship to your kids. But if somebody of this age gets deported, who is it that suffers the most? It's obviously the kids, right? So not a system that makes a lot of sense from that standpoint. So again, they choose between either 10 years in Mexico or remaining in the US and being adopted. Yeah, I'm not going to ask if you understand it because it's not really to be understood, Okay, one more hypo, I think. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's all we got for the hypos, but that really encapsulates the story of Gabriela and Patricia really encapsulates kind of the community here in Aurora for the most part, folks who are in this situation. So their family is what we would call a mixed status family because you have some people with immigration status and some people that are undocumented. So I want to do a very quick sort of breakdown of what we're going to call the removal or deportation process. So we're just talking about the executive branch of the federal government. We've got these sort of 3 departments that are in charge of immigration policy. All the way on the left is what's called the Department of State. That's who, again, if Gabriela and Patricia go and they apply for an immigrant visa, it's going to be at a consulate that's run by the DOS. And then in the middle, we have what's called the Department of Homeland Security. And under that umbrella is CBP, ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. ICE is very much in the news these days because they're the ones who are doing all of this sort of enforcement activity that's really not focused on, you know, criminal immigrants. It's really sort of focused more so on show of force. And then we've also got USCIS. USCIS handles applications for naturalization. They adjudicate family petitions, waivers. And then you've also got CBP. CBP are basically Border Patrol officers. So you'll interact with CBP anytime that you come into the United States from abroad, either at a port of entry, at a land, or at an airport. And then over on the right, we've got what's called the Department of Justice, and they run the immigration courts. And what I want to talk about just really briefly is the breakdown between what we call affirmative immigration and defensive immigration. If you are in danger of being deported from the United States, you are eligible to apply for what we call relief from removal. You can go to an immigration judge and say, yes, I'm deportable, but please do not deport me because X reason. Either I want to apply for asylum or my kids would suffer if I were deported. But this blue section is what we call affirmative immigration, which is I've got a family member who wants to petition for me and I'm going to apply for status affirmatively. So maybe they never get found out as an undocumented person because they're able to just get papers through a family relationship. And the reason I want to talk about this distinction is that, believe it or not, if you're in this red group, if you're in the group of people who are at risk of being deported, there's quite a few options that you have if you get put into removal proceedings that you would not otherwise have. And where I'm going with this is to say, people who get picked up by ICE, if they just sort of give up and they say it's okay, I'll leave, they have quite a lot to lose. So that's what we're going to talk about in a minute here. And so since we're talking about ICE immigration enforcement, I've got one more pop quiz topic for my audience here. Who thinks that undocumented immigrants have rights under the Constitution of the United States? Raise your hand. You think yes? Some rights. Well, I mean, it should be obvious, but you know, not so sure. So we're going to look at the 14th Amendment here. And what the 14th Amendment says is that anybody who's born in the United States is a citizen of the United States. And no state shall make or enforce any law that abridges the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States. So far, we're only talking about citizens, not undocumented people. However, there's another clause that says you can't deprive any person, whether or not they're a citizen, of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So that means you can't just deport somebody because you're depriving them of a property interest at the very least. You got to give them due process of law. So they actually have to go through some sort of a process. And also the Fourth Amendment is what protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. So this is all those cop shows, you have the right to remain silent. That's to show that they're complying with the Fourth Amendment, that it's not an unreasonable search or seizure, and that you can't, any sort of a law enforcement agency, including ICE, is not going to get what's called a warrant, an arrest warrant, a search warrant, without probable cause. And so we're going to talk about what exactly a warrant is. The reason this is important is, again, there's a lot of ICE activity, and we've heard of situations where ICE says, we've got a warrant for your arrest. And I want to talk about why that's not always necessarily the case. So the definition of a warrant is a court order given to detain a party if probable cause is present. Pretty straightforward. So a court order means that it's issued by a court, not by the cops or by ICE. You actually have to have an impartial finder of fact, like a judge, issue this warrant. So this here is an example of an arrest warrant. And if you can see, it's issued by a court and it's signed by a judge. Now on this next slide, we're going to look at something that ICE calls an administrative warrant. And it is not a warrant. Just because you call it a warrant doesn't make it a warrant. And if you'll notice, it's issued by the Department of Homeland Security and it's signed by an ICE officer. So for example, if an ICE officer comes to the front desk here at Aurora Public Library, Well, we're in a public area, right? So it depends. But let's say they come to your house and they say, we've got a warrant for your arrest. This document that we're looking at right now is not in fact a warrant that complies with the US Constitution that gives them the right to invade your private domicile, your living space. So that's the community education part of this, is to understand this thing right here is not a warrant.
What is that?
This is, well, it's called an administrative warrant. The reason that it's not a judicial warrant is that it's not signed by somebody who's employed by the judicial branch, right? It's signed by somebody who works for the executive branch. So it's the same, it's like the cops are making up their own warrants.
Why are they allowed to have it? Why is this thing allowed?
It is allowed because they get away with it, right? And
I mean, it seems to me if you handing somebody says a warrant for the arrest of action or something, seems to me that they're saying, you know, they're saying they have a warrant.
that's exactly right. And so it's not technically a lie, but it's incredibly misleading, right? The reason they say we've got a warrant for your arrest, you have to go through an entire conversation and say, is the warrant signed by a judge? No, it's not. Then I'm not honoring it and I'm asking you to leave. At that point, they leave. They really do leave. But most folks
Don't know the difference.
don't know this, right? And so that's why it's my role and it's our role sort of as advocates to make sure as many people know this as possible. So if that's the only thing that we remember, this is pretty important.
Why didn't somebody go to court and have that form? It's gotten rid of,
Can't do it, they'll just come up with something else.
but it's not.
Yeah,
In other words, it says the Thomas a warrant. That seems to me to be illegal prima facie.
right. No, but so for example, deceptive law enforcement tactics, for example, you know, your buddy already snitched on you, right? That sort of, it's okay, law enforcement are allowed to lie to you, right? That's perfectly within the bounds of the Constitution. Unfortunately, but that is the case. And that's basically what's going on here, is calling this thing a warrant, I think, is a deceptive law enforcement practice.
For sure.
So I'm just gonna
Why didn't
continue on.
why didn't they challenge that?
I'm trying, man. I'm
I'm
trying. So again, just really quickly, a couple other really important constitutional rights that are also enjoyed by undocumented people is the Fifth Amendment that says that you can't be compelled to testify against yourself. And then the Sixth Amendment that says that everybody's got the right to counsel in criminal proceedings. Immigration proceedings are not strictly criminal proceedings, but you definitely do have a right to counsel under the Constitution if you're at risk of getting deported. Okay, so I know that was pretty quick, but I just want to move on to some sort of practical advice here. This is meant for anybody who might be faced with ICE contact. So again, just really quickly, most undocumented people are deportable or removable. And as we were just mentioning a little bit earlier, removal proceedings are separate from family-based immigration, and the rules apply differently. If you recall, we were talking about the case of Gabriel and Patricia. They unfortunately are in a really tough spot. They don't have great options for getting their papers. However, they would have quite a few good options for defending themselves against removal if they were put in that position. A few examples of relief that might be available to you in removal proceedings. There's asylum. There's what's called cancellation of removal, and there's also what's known as voluntary departure, which is, okay, I don't have any good options, I'll leave, but I'm not going to have the stigma of having been ordered removed by a judge. And therefore it would be simpler for you to come back to the United States at some point. This form right here is a document that is typically provided by an ICE agent who has contact with an undocumented person to try to get them to agree to do what's called voluntary departure. It might be a little bit difficult to read, but I do want to make sure that I'm sharing it with you guys. At the bottom of this document, they're going to ask you to check one of these three boxes. It's called request for disposition. The bottom box here basically says, I admit that I'm in the country illegally. I believe that I do not face harm if I return to my country. I give up my right to a hearing before the immigration court. I wish to return to my country as soon as arrangements can be made to effect my departure. I understand that I may be held in detention until my departure. Under no circumstances should you ever sign this document. The only possible exception is if you've already decided to go back home and your bags are literally packed and you don't want to pay for the plane ticket. That's the only reason that you would ever sign this voluntary departure order. Even if you know that they've got you dead to rights, that you've got no good options before an immigration court, there's absolutely no reason to give up this easily. But unfortunately, deceptive law enforcement tactics are allowed. And we've seen the footage, we've heard the stories. And folks need to be prepared for ICE agents to maybe not be completely honest with them, not be completely gentle with them, and try to intimidate them into signing this. So the thing that I try to establish with any client or any just former or potential client, even somebody that I know I can't help, but they just come to consult with me, is to just say, I want you to promise me, or promise whoever is important to you, that you are not going to agree to voluntary departure. And the way to remember that is just don't sign any documents if you have contact with ICE. I'm sorry, but I've already decided before today that I'm not going to sign anything. Because this voluntary departure order is an agreement that you're going to leave the country right away. Okay. I'm not sure that we've got time to go through the Illinois Trust Act. Did you have a question, Kathy, that you wanted to?
No, not.
Oh, okay. Well, I will just touch on this briefly. You know, law enforcement, outside of the realm of immigration is kind of on a state by state thing. The issue is that the federal government makes funds available to local law enforcement agencies. If they will basically play ball and if they'll sort of like serve as little deputized ICE agents. And thanks to Governor Rauner, thanks to the Illinois legislature, we've got this thing called the Illinois Trust Act from 2017 that says, we're not going to take your money and we're not going to assist you with immigration enforcement. So if the victim of domestic violence goes to the courthouse and applies for an order of protection, and the courthouse clerk has a problem with the fact that that person doesn't speak English, they call ICE, they're in violation of this Illinois Trust Act. Unfortunately, those same protections don't apply in other states. So Illinois has done a great job of protecting the rights of undocumented people. We've got this Illinois Trust Act, we've got, you know, driver's licenses for undocumented people. So I just wanted to touch on that. Now, some advice for undocumented people generally. Okay, of course, an immigration lawyer is going to tell you, come talk to an immigration lawyer, but I really do think that it's important to speak to an immigration lawyer as soon as possible so that you have a good understanding of what your situation really is. Obviously, if you've ever used fraudulent documents, don't keep those on you because that's evidence that you've committed a crime. Be sure that any bank or other accounts are in your correct name. For example, if you're working for cash, it's still very important for you to be able to document that you're here in the United States, that you're caring for your children, for example. So everything should be in your name. And I recommend having an emergency plan, which really doesn't have to be anything too detailed, but it's just, if something happens, if I get picked up by ICE, who do I call to pick up my kids? If they offer me, let's say, a $5,000 bond to be released from immigration detention, who are we going to ask for first, second, and third, you know, to loan us the money, for example? I am well aware that on social media right now, there are lots of services that people are selling for big dollar amounts for like an emergency preparedness kit that includes like a short-term power of attorney, that includes short-term guardianships for your children. Listen, if you decide that that's necessary, that that's the best way to plan for the future, that's perfectly okay. But I don't think that that's necessarily warranted in every case. I think it's never a bad idea to plan for the future, but I would recommend, you know, maybe speak to like a family attorney before going to a notary and filling out forms like that. But what is very important is just to sort of think through, in the event that I get picked up, who am I going to call first, second, and third? Okay, and then in the event of actual contact with ICE, if you're at your home, you've got the right not to open the door. If an agent says, I've got a warrant, what do? We ask to see the warrant. Slide it under the door, hold it up to the window. If the agent says, please let me in, I gotta use the restroom, now is not the time to be friendly. So once you open the door, you are inviting the agent to come in and search the property. And for example, if it's a single family residence that's been subdivided in 4 apartments where 4 separate families are living, unfortunately, letting the ICE officer into that home is basically giving them consent to search 4 private residences. And so just don't take their word for it. They say they got a warrant, show me the warrant. If it is in fact signed by a judge, then it's a lawful warrant, you should comply. I have to tell you, I've never heard tell of an ICE agent being deputized by a state judge to serve a search warrant. I just don't think that's ever happened. Maybe it has, but that's what the sheriff's department is for, right? And so if an ICE agent says, I've got a warrant, they've got a piece of paper that they call a warrant, but it's not in fact a search warrant, right? Of course, I don't recommend that you resist physically. And I do recommend that you do not answer any questions if you don't sign anything. And also, if you have a fear of returning to your home country, you should say so loudly and clearly at every chance that you get. If you are afraid to go home, you need to make sure that that's on the record as early in the process as possible. Now, again, they can't take you at your home without a warrant. However, if you were in a public place and they have this, what they call an administrative warrant, then yes, that is valid in public places. So if you're in public, you don't have to answer questions, but an administrative warrant is valid.
Wait, so they come into, as you say, the library.
Right.
And they stop you. What rights do you have then?
The same rights you have for anybody who wishes to speak
Do
to
you
you.
not talk to them?
Of course, you don't have to talk to anybody. And so like I saw this ICE enforcement activity over the last couple of days where, you know, sort of what's happening now is you can sort of refer to it as a raid, where ICE is just approaching people and saying, hey, do you mind if we just ask you a couple of questions? It's just a friendly chat. You have the right not to answer our questions, but they approach you, they engage you, they're friendly. Do you mind if I ask you whether you have any immigration status? Right? They don't introduce themselves. They don't explain the nature of the question. They just ask you this question. And if you said, well, I'm undocumented. Okay, well, now there's enough reason to say, okay, now we've established that you're removable. So I'm going to place you under removal proceedings, right? You don't have to answer any questions, right? It's just that simple.
What you just said about, proceeding, does that mean you're under arrest?
Yeah, typically at that point, you're going to be detained. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so again, in a public place, you have the right not to answer questions. You have the right not to sign documents, obviously. Just think about it as just somebody who comes up to you on the street and asks you for $5, right? Not a crime to ask me for $5, but it's also not a crime for me to say, keep my mouth shut and just keep walking. Right. And then especially since we're here at a library, I think it's important to sort of understand what your organization's policy is. Hopefully there's a written policy about what to do in the event of an ICE agent coming with an administrative warrant. It's also important this training was sort of adapted from a training I did at a DV shelter. And so it's really important to understand what parts of the property are considered public or private. And so what areas would an administrative warrant pass muster and where would it not? And then I would say that if you can safely do so without obstructing, I think it's a good idea to record or document any sort of interactions with ICE. Okay. And then, so for my massive audience here, do we have any questions or sort of?
I still don't understand when someone comes in, to the library.
Yeah.
You obviously don't know your name, they don't know anything about you, and you don't say anything. But I mean, anyways, if you're in a public place, what options do they have? What can they get it out of you?
It's really just the manipulation, sort of psychological tactics to get you to talk.
Say, they don't, even though they have to have an administrative warrant to be here.
No, no, but that's the point. Is that ICE agents, I would imagine, are incentivized to catch as many folks as they can, and so they're fishing.
Right.
So it's a fishing expedition. And so we're in an atmosphere right now where that sort of thing appears to be sort of standard operating procedure. So it's really important to know that, I'm not a fish, I'm not going to talk to you.
But then again, they certainly wouldn't know who you were until you told them.
Correct. Or whether you have papers or not.
Right. So they really can't have an administrative warrant that way.
Oh, no, it's possible that somebody could follow you into the library and say, hey, are you Patrick? I've got an administrative warrant. We've already determined on facts.
Who you are.
Yeah, that you're undocumented and we're here to pick you up and put you in removal proceedings. That's certainly possible. And again, if you're in a public place.
What if you gave a speech, or what if you appeared in a public forum where undocumented people were coming up to talk about their problems, or something like that?
Mhm.
Could they just get arrested?
It depends. Not if you don't answer questions.
Or
But
if they publicly say in a meeting, I'm
undocumented.
I've been in the country for 15 years and I
Yep.
don't know why they're after me.
Right, that's correct.
And then they say, my name is, Jose, and I've been here for 15 years and I don't know why they're after me. Would that be enough for an ICE agent to fill out a warrant and get it?
Yes, I think it certainly could be, because most people get put into removal proceedings because they're here without status. That's all. I mean, in the vast majority of cases that I see, the notice to appear, which is kind of like a criminal complaint, is the document that starts removal proceedings, alleges that you're deportable because you're here without status. That's it. That's all it is. Any sort of any statement that we've heard in the news lately about we're only targeting criminals is, I'm searching for the phrase, is not accurate, right? Yes, it's bull hockey, right? Because no, people are being targeted. I mean, there's quite a bit of racial profiling going on, clearly. And then people are being targeted and just sort of in fishing expeditions.
And I did unmute, or I did allow for the audience on Zoom. If they have any questions, we only have about 5 minutes. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, thank you.
You can also type in the chat.
Thanks, Patrick, for the discussion. It's great. I really appreciate it.
In the meantime, we've heard that there are a lot of also scams,
Yes,
out
absolutely.
there and things. So if someone, falls prey to, for example, a scam, what advice do you have for them?
So, well, I mean, once we fall in, I mean, the idea is to avoid it, right? The question is, how to avoid scams, right? And, so sorry, I just realized I didn't hold the microphone the entire time.
That's okay.
I hope I'm coming through okay. All right. And frankly, I'm going to get into this a little bit more in the Spanish language training. But there's a reason why we lawyers put our credentials up on the wall. It's not just because we're vain. It's so that people understand that they're actually interacting with a real life lawyer. And so any attorney, you can check out our credentials, with the state where we're registered. There's also a program called recognized, BIA accreditation. Here in Aurora, I know that we have 2 organizations that have what's called BIA accreditation that are arranged as nonprofits. The attorneys sometimes work with them, but you don't actually have to be an attorney to have BIA accreditation. You can do sort of like quasi lawyer work, and you can sort of represent people in removal proceedings or in immigration proceedings. So if somebody says that they work with immigration, somebody claims to be an immigration expert, check out, do not be afraid to ask for their credentials, and verify that this is somebody who's really working with immigration. And I would just say be skeptical. Unfortunately, we're in these circumstances where there are a lot of magic beans that are for sale on the internet right now. and there is a lot of focus on, fear rather than facts necessarily. And so, but unfortunately, like once you become a victim to a scam at that point, you got to talk to law enforcement to try to get your money back. And unfortunately, that's not really my department, but I would just say the most important thing is to only interact with somebody who's either a licensed attorney or a BIA accredited rep.
What does BIA stand?
Oh, so the Board of Immigration Appeals, it's within the Department of Justice. They basically have a program where you can become an accredited representative. And so you, even though you haven't like passed the bar exam, even though you haven't like graduated from law school, you can provide limited representation in some immigration stuff matters. And it's a great program, but you have to make sure that if somebody claims to be accredited, that they truly are. And so I think I might have, I'm sure if I've got it on this. I don't think we have questions here. So.
And on our website, we have the directory for if anyone needs to find. And a DOJ.
Oh, you do have, that's awesome. Okay.
Representative. We have a link to that as well as the link to the ILO directory.
Okay. That's okay. I have it on the Spanish language training. But yeah, if you Google BIA accreditation roster, it can be a little bit tricky with immigration, for example, because I am not a member of the Illinois bar. I actually took the bar exam in Indiana. And so everything I do is federal jurisdiction. So the cool thing is I can practice before USCIS or before the immigration court, anywhere in the US, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. But the other side of that is that sometimes people will take my advice and they'll try to find me on the Illinois website. They don't find me. Like, wait a second, this guy's, no, you have to look for me in Indiana. But again, if you Google me, it says right there, I'm a member of the Indiana bar. I think somebody has it. Somebody raised their hand. Susanna, we can see you if you'd like to ask a question.
Susanna, you're on mute.
If you'd like
Oh,
to
there you
unmute yourself, I'd love to answer your question.
Let's see. We don't hear anything. I'm not sure if you're talking.
Do you have your speakers?
You can also type it in the chat. Colleen was talking earlier. So.
Oh, okay, sure. If anybody has questions, you can unmute yourself and speak up, or you can type it in the chat. We got maybe a minute or two left.
Looks like she is unmuted, but don't hear anything from you, Susanna. Looks like you're unmuted.
Going once, going twice. I guess with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you to the library for having me. And thanks for the great engagement. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks everybody on Zoom. See you later.
Thank you for attending, everyone. We will have a recording of this in the future on YouTube, and then we will have a session in Spanish starting at 7:15.
7:15 for the Spanish session. You are welcome to join then as well. There is a link to the Spanish Zoom on our events page. Thank you, everyone. Here's the Q&A. Here are the questions. Oh, well, I haven't closed out. So here's what about information regarding newborn babies and hospitals
Sure.
not to be able to issue birth certificate as citizens.
You said you haven't closed it yet?
No, I haven't closed it
Okay,
yet.
so
So Susanna's still on there.
So the 14th Amendment of the Constitution says that if you're born in the United States, you're a United States citizen. The President of the United States, whose name escapes me, forget the guy's name, but issued in early February of this year, issued an executive order that says that not so fast. If your mother was undocumented at the time that you were born, then you're in fact not a United States citizen. And that case is still pending before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has made some important rulings on that case, but that don't go to what we call the merits. They made rulings about some other procedural stuff. But they haven't said whether that executive order can go forward or not. Just today, USCIS issued a memo that says that they're prepared to implement that executive order, but we don't know what that means. It appears to be that what they want states to do is to stop giving birth certificates to the children of undocumented parents, if you can imagine that, or to give them like a scarlet letter type of birth certificate. But so anyway, as of today, you know, if you're born in the United States, you're a US citizen, and we're going to continue to operate on that assumption until we hear different. I think that's it. Thanks again.